public.
It's not even a dispute at this point that they were suppressing information, and that the Hunter Biden laptop story absolutely got suppressed at the time. It was right before the election. And,
Right.
look, we've had testimony in front of Congress. We've had statements from Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook.
Hmm.
We've had Jack Dorsey himself came out and admitted that, yeah, it was a mistake to suppress the story. And what's happened with Twitter, what we've learned through the release of these files is that there is an apparatus in place. I think the most interesting thing is that there's an apparatus in place where the FBI can basically specifically flag certain tweets and posts for Twitter and Facebook to look at. This isn't like a general be on the lookout for misinformation. They have an apparatus in place at a micro level to target specific kinds of topics and specific tweets for employees of the company to look at. And when this has been dug into a little bit further is, well, when did this apparatus start being developed? This wasn't something that was brand new back at the last election. This was really an anti-terrorism thing that Google, Twitter, Facebook, these big companies decided to work with the government. This is going back 15, 20 years to where they're like, look, if ISIS is posting certain things and we need to know about it. And so this communication was opened up between these companies. And then we had the huge, thing about misinformation at the 2016 campaign and
Hmm.
how that affected. And so, yes, these companies were on hyper alert, but I think it's not even a dispute that the story was suppressed. And what it really comes down to is, like, this was a newsworthy story.
Yeah.
All right. Now, whether or not you want to say how much stock to put into it or how much the news should air it 24/7 to try and swing voters, or whether a voter should even look at that story and have their vote determined on it, that's one thing. But it definitely is a newsworthy story when you have a presidential candidate or a sitting president and their son is involved in some kind of scandal like that.
Okay, so
And
you've been involved, Thomas, in so many different types of investigation as the former DA here. You know a lot about what it takes going into an investigation, what information maybe you want to bring out to the public, if you want to preserve the investigation. So let me ask you this. At this point, the FBI has had this laptop, I would imagine, for quite a long time. They know everything that's in there. If there's nothing in there that is to the point of bad criminality, besides maybe some personal pictures, maybe he was with some women and maybe he was doing some drugs, I would imagine that stuff is probably on the laptop. Why not just say that and hold a press conference and put an end to this nonsense? Why is it that they have to come out and say, no, what Twitter's saying is not true, and we didn't have all these people suppressing information? Why not just come out and say, listen, there was nothing in there that rose to the level of blah, 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 blah? Why don't they just do that and put an end to this story? That's what I don't understand.
well, they're not coming out and blatantly saying that they weren't suppressing information. And they're not coming out and look, when the story broke, no one was trying to debunk the fact that Hunter Biden might have been doing some scandalous things and might have been receiving payments from foreign governments. But at this point, it's hard. The reason why the government doesn't want to admit that they were actually on a micro level managing what some of these companies were doing is because
Yeah.
that starts getting into a violation of the First Amendment. The more the government is involved, you say it all the time. People don't understand the First Amendment. A private company like Twitter or Facebook or Google, they can do whatever they want.
Right.
But it changes when they're doing it at the behest of the government. Now it does become a government action. It is a First Amendment issue. And so the more distance, the more attenuated it is between what the FBI or what the DOJ is saying to these companies about specific topics, the less a liability there's going to be for the government on a First Amendment ground. Look, Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, how many times has this guy been grilled in front of Congress? I mean, they grill him. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? And he even said, look, he came out publicly. He goes, look, there is a way to shadow ban and reduce visibility on certain stories. And they're tasked with this giant job of seeing what's misinformation and what's not misinformation. What is what we call fake news and what is real news. And it's an impossible mission for these companies to do. But what's interesting about the Twitter files is you look into some of these emails between some of the employees, and there are some employees who are emailing. They said, hey, what are our grounds for suppressing this Hunter Biden story? I mean, we're going to face some tough questions down the road if we don't have legitimate grounds for why this is a dangerous story and we need to block it. And they blocked it, I mean, completely across the board. Even direct messaging, you couldn't mention the story and share it that way. And so it was basically a knee-jerk reaction to what happened in 2016. They didn't want it to affect the election. And I think that's a huge concern for anybody in this country. Like I said, was it going to be overblown? I think that was really what the concern of the government was, is like, oh, this is going to be overblown the way Hillary's emails were overblown. And this is going to be made more of a story than it is. And that might be true, but that doesn't change the fact that it was a newsworthy story. I mean, the New York Post, they put it out there and this thing completely got squashed. And here we are 2 years later. And I like the fact that Elon is starting to release some of these things. And the message from the White House I saw was they made a public statement. They go, look, this is old news. Why are we focusing on this old news? So it's not really a challenging what happened. But as far as what's on the laptop, you brought that up. We don't know. There's a lot of speculation on what's going on and what's in that laptop. What they didn't tell Jack Dorsey and these guys at Twitter and these guys at Facebook when they wanted this story suppressed as fake news, what wasn't told to them is there was an open criminal investigation against Biden's son, and they were openly investigating him about things. They had not said that. And had they said that, maybe these social media companies wouldn't have been so quick to go, oh, this is just fake news. This is really blurry because, the DOJ and the FBI is really at the behest of the executive, which is the president in power. So, the whole Biden-Trump thing and the way the news media has been either manipulated or has just actively kind of shot itself in the foot a lot of times. It's interesting to see how things are developing. As a constitutional right for the First Amendment, we want the freedom of the press because we want the freedom to be informed. And you either fall into there's one of two camps. Either you let all the information go and there's going to be a lot of bad information. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it was a guy just running in the streets going, you're not going to believe what just happened in the state of Cross. And it could be completely BS. And guys would get their muskets ready and go to war, or get their swords, they get on horseback and they go to war over that misinformation. So there's always been a lot of misinformation, but this country was founded on, we're not going to control the flow of information. We're going to let that have a freedom. And when the government's getting involved with social media companies, and that's really how the news is getting, shared between everybody now. When they're getting involved, the government is now starting to interfere with that information. And it's a slippery slope. It's dangerous to try and censor. Now, this is a perfect example of, you tried to censor something. You said it was bad information. Comes out, it was actually not bad information, and it was censored. Well, how much of this is really going on? And how much is the American public willing as a journalist, you should be able to say whatever you want. And you know that you yourself are being censored by computer algorithms. If you bring a certain topic up, you're not going to be put on YouTube. You're not going to be played on Facebook, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, in layman's terms, I would put it this way. You could tell me whether you agree or not. Hunter Biden is an F up. That's what he is. He's had, drug issues and the prostitutes. And I think what's on that laptop is probably a lot of that stuff. Did he take advantage of who his father is? Sure, absolutely. Did he put this country in any danger? No, I don't see that at all. He took advantage of who his father was. He got paid some money for jobs that he wasn't qualified for, but I don't see.
Well, what's really interesting about the Hunter Biden and the connection with Joe Biden is everything that's happening in Ukraine, right? And that deserves to be fully investigated. It really does, because I think the American public needs to know, we're basically conducting a war overseas in Ukraine. It is on the brink of nuclear war. Mm-hmm. And why are we over there? What's everything that's led up to that? And the fact is, if you look at how the Ukraine government's set up and some of the bigger companies that are set up over there, they have a direct connection to Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden, he was basically like our ambassador to Ukraine during the Obama administration. So he has a lot of connections there. And that goes back to when Trump was asking Ukraine to investigate, right? And Trump was asking Ukraine to do it. And he really overstepped by saying, well, you're not going to get the weapons deals. You're not going to do that, this and that. But was it wrong to have that investigation done as to what's the involvement there? And so there's a lot of pieces that just no one's ever going to know. And things like so much history has gone by, but there are connections that could be made. And there's just a lot of conspiracy theory now and speculation. And That's kind of what the misinformation campaign is all about to the American public, is you denote something as a conspiracy theory. Let's get it, completely, it has no credibility whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if it happens to come out 20 years from now or 30 years from now that it was all true, no one's going to care. And that's how American history kind of has been on a lot of topics.
You're right. I agree. Thomas Moskal,